Thank you very much for the opportunity to participate in this event. I work at the European Policies Research Centre, which has bases at the University of Strathclyde in Scotland, but also at the Technical University in Delft in the Netherlands. We specialise in research on regional and territorial development, and it's work that we've been involved in linked to the Territorial Agenda 2030 that I'm here to talk about today, as you've heard, and specifically work on the Small Places Matter pilot action. The Territorial Agenda 2030 was launched by the German presidency in December last year as an action-oriented framework to promote territorial cohesion in Europe. It's got its roots in the numerous complex development challenges facing EU territories, and it does sort of have a strong focus on specific issues facing rural areas and the different types of sort of rural areas. What the Territorial Agenda aims to bring, because there's so many strategies and agendas and initiatives around, is a focus on interrelated and interdependent nature of all of these development challenges, the need and importance of coordination and cooperation in how they're addressed, and a specific focus and recognition on the territorial dimension of change. I've skipped a slide too early. Yes, the Territorial Agenda has two overarching objectives, one being a focus on just Europe and the other on green Europe. And as you can see on the slide, it breaks down into 6 priorities, covering a range of themes from circular economy and healthy environment through to focus on promoting a balanced development in Europe and functional regions and focusing on local and regional development and reducing inequalities between places. It's keenly felt that the Territorial Agenda should be a resource that can be worked with, not just a remote and distant strategy, as people have been commenting already and mentioning in the chat, that sort of engagement between the sort of high level EU strategies and aims and objectives. It's vital to connect that to initiatives on the ground and places themselves. So there was this aim to have the Territorial Agenda having a role in making things happen and supporting change. And to do this and to demonstrate ways in which the Territorial Agenda can be worked with, there has been the launch of a number of pilot actions, one of which is the Small Places Matter pilot action. And the aim of the pilot action is to sort of offer opportunities to demonstrate and test new and innovative practices, share approaches, explore ways to promote particularly place-sensitive policy making, and strengthen the territorial dimension in policies. The work I've been involved in an ongoing basis is the pilot action on where the focus is on the role of small towns and villages, and it's led by the Ministry of Local Government and Modernisation in Norway, and it also involves partners from Poland, Germany, Sweden, Romania, Switzerland and Ireland. And we've also really got a lot from working closely with DG Regio, DG Agri, and also ESPON. The work focuses particularly on this vital role that small towns and villages have in promoting territorial development and integrated territorial development in particular. And it aims to sort of build on the scope and potential for existing work and projects to be linked up. And there's a lot of really interesting work going on, but sometimes it can be kind of isolated, and there's a lot of scope for projects and initiatives to link together and learn from one another. It's also recognising the importance of grassroots action and engagement, and particularly supporting and boosting the capacity of small towns and villages and communities to engage in territorial development initiatives and to participate and drive their own development. And also focusing, as I've said, on the opportunity for cooperation across territories on this theme, and particularly the potential offered by intermunicipal cooperation, which particularly for remote and rural, sparsely populated areas is a way to build critical mass and capacity to act. It's still relatively early days for the pilot action. The pilot action runs for 3 years, and we've had a year to kind of get together, build the network, and moving forward into 2022, it's kind of the focus of the work is sharpening up, and there's specific areas of interest emerging. But there's been a sort of getting to know you process amongst the partners, and that has revealed some quite interesting initiatives and actions which are already in place. And as I've said, part of this work is not about sort of introducing lots of new things, but also recognizing innovative and interesting approaches that are already in place. And as I mentioned, one of the key areas of interest is on capacity building, particularly through networks for small town development and intermunicipal cooperation. And there's a few examples I could mention. For example, the partners in Poland, there's been a range of initiatives introduced there targeting towns threatened with sort of permanent marginalisation and decline, and initiatives in place there to boost administrative capacity of local governments to, for example, develop strategic projects or strategic planning initiatives. And there's a Centre for Advisory Support in place to help offer them sort of advice and help them build capacity. There's a local development programme, which again is working with municipalities directly to help them develop institutional development plans and support, again, the capacity building. In Germany, there's an interesting example where there's been pilot work to establish a small town academy, and it's a pilot to sort of pool knowledge and create strong networks. And the experience in Germany is quite interesting as well, because as one of the partners was pointing out, there's a lot of examples where it's addressing issues of sort of small towns in decline, and depopulation, as we've been hearing, is such a key concern. But in a number of the partner countries, it's small towns that are seen as sort of key drivers, points of growth. Particularly COVID is sort of leading to a kind of rethink of what the role that small towns are playing, because people are kind of thinking more moving out of cities, and so it's not all just a focus on sort of trying to build things up, it's sort of maximising existing strong roles that are there. Example in Sweden, again, it's a slightly different angle, but similar themes, where there's a network of municipalities in northern Sweden where very remote and sparse population is the key issue. And they've been working together on outputs in relation to sort of boosting overall regional attractiveness. As I've said, it's still quite early days in the pilot action, but I was asked to kind of focus on any lessons that can be drawn from the work so far. And some of these are kind of obvious, but worth restating, and others more specific. There's obviously this sort of complex and interrelated issues and themes that these small towns and villages are facing, particularly in rural areas, and that coordination and cooperation is a key tool and approach to addressing these needs. As I've said, the diversity of experience of the partners with the diversity of experience of sort of small towns and villages in different territorial contexts has been interesting. But at the same time, there's these sort of common strands and themes that run through, particularly in relation to managing population change, and not just increasingly a discussion is being had about balancing a focus on boosting hard economic growth versus new thinking about managing and mitigating change and adaptation, and pursuing quality of life as an objective, as opposed to just jobs. And instead of focusing just on jobs, it's more about thinking, are there people for the jobs? It's, again, has been mentioned in the chat. There's also the factors around coordination is nice to talk about, but it can actually be quite challenging to put in place, and cooperation similarly needs resources, time and people. A lot of coordination and cooperation efforts revolve around sort of breaking down institutional barriers, reducing complex regulations and frameworks, but actually there are a lot of frameworks that are needed and are really useful in terms of new instruments and tools like ITIs and CLLDs and Interreg initiatives that have been noted as very valuable in giving structure to a kind of willingness to cooperate on these themes. But also just that sort of institutional and personal enthusiasm is definitely important, particularly in the context of small towns and villages, where it can make all the difference having one or two key people who are prepared to push things forward. As I've said and hinted at through the presentation, another key area that we've picked up is the fact that there is already a huge amount going on, and that there's a lot of value in looking to that and clustering initiatives and what we've kind of called harvesting projects, looking at through old Interreg projects that were maybe ahead of their time when they were implemented, but now offer some interesting solutions to problems that are applicable now. There's also work around how to engage with the new tools and instruments. And again, as has been discussed, how to better engage and use new approaches to ensuring community and stakeholder participation in strategic planning, and linked to that the importance of building capacity at these local levels to be able to engage with wider strategic initiatives. So just to finish off, the Small Town Academy initiative put it nicely that really the focus of the pilot action is that sort of development by, with and for small places. And as I've said, it's still a work in progress, and hopefully as the work moves on, we'll have more examples and more outputs to report back on. So watch this space. Thanks very much.